And welcome to the February 25th, 2025 Eugene Planning Commission meeting. I'd like to call this meeting to order. My name is Jason Lear, and I'm chair of the Eugene Planning Commission. To begin this evening, I'd like to call on Commissioner Beeson for the city's land acknowledgement statement. If you're ready, Commissioner Beeson.
Since time immemorial, the Kalapuya people have been the indigenous stewards to our region, building dynamic communities, maintaining balance with wildlife, and enacting sustainable land practices. This land acknowledgement is a way of resisting the erasure of indigenous histories and to honor native communities by inviting truth, reconciliation. Following treaties between 1851 and 1855, Kalapuya people were dispossessed of their indigenous homeland by the United States government, forcibly removed to the Coast Reservation in Western Oregon. As we consider the impacts of colonization, we also acknowledge the strength and the resiliency of displaced indigenous people. The city of Eugene is built within the traditional homelands known as the Kalapuya Ilahi. Kalapuya descendants are citizens of the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde Community of Oregon and the Confederated Tribes of the Siletz Indians of Oregon. They continue to make contributions in our communities here and across the lands. We express our respect for the inherent political sovereignty of all federally recognized tribal nations and indigenous people who live in the state of Oregon and across the nation. Therefore, the Planning Commission recognizes what we do today will affect the many generations who will come after us.
Thanks, Commissioner Beeson, and thank you to everyone joining us in this virtual meeting format. Today, our meeting will begin with public comment, followed by an informational work session on the city's capital improvement program for 2025 through 2031. Anyone wishing to join the meeting can do so by following the instructions listed on the agenda for this meeting. Planning Commission meetings can also be viewed by watching the live stream available on our website or the broadcast on Comcast Channel 21. For those who join the meeting via computer device or phone, your microphone, webcam, and phone are automatically muted when you enter the meeting as an attendee. If you wish to participate during the public comment portion of the meeting and haven't already done so, please raise your virtual hand now to join the speakers queue in one of two ways. For those viewing the meeting on a computer, laptop, or other device, click once on the blue hand icon. For those listening to the meeting on a phone, press star 9. Public comment is an opportunity for individuals to speak to the Planning Commission on any topics except for items scheduled for public hearing or public hearing items for which the record is already closed. As a reminder, your hand must be raised to be in the queue for public comment. Crystal, do we have anyone for public comment?
Looks like we do not this time. So
okay. I'll now close public comment. Moving on to our next agenda item, I'd like to turn it over to Keisha Edison to begin the staff presentation. Following the presentation, the commission will have the opportunity to ask questions.
Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. My name is Keisha Edison. I'm a senior financial analyst with Central Finance. I'm going to share my screen and get the presentation started. So let me know if you're not able to see the slides. Okay. Is everyone seeing the presentation in front of you? Okay, great. Well, like I said, I'm Keisha Edison. With me today are Jeff Perry, our facilities director, and Jennifer Willer, our city engineer. I'm going to kick off today's presentation of the capital improvement program, and then I'll turn it over to Jeff and Jennifer to give some detail on their respective departments. The Capital Improvement Program, or CIP, accomplishes a number of purposes. The CIP is a multi-year planning document that serves as a roadmap for the city's capital projects for fiscal years 26 through 31. It is also a budget document. Once it is approved, these projects become the city's capital budget for the next biennium. In this case, the 2025 to 2031 CIP will be the basis of the 2025-2027 capital budget. Capital projects are resource intensive and require significant capital planning in advance to execute. Therefore, a multi-year capital plan is considered best practice for local governments, and the CIP process helps us balance our capital plans with available funding, communicate upcoming capital needs, and connect our spending with our goals and the community's needs. This diagram shows the basic process through which a project goes from idea to construction to use. Throughout the process, there are multiple sources of input that inform city staff on the needs and desires of the community and drive forward the capital planning process. First, a capital need is identified and analyzed through a variety of planning and modeling efforts. These efforts are typically documented through master plans, and these plans may be developed with engagement from the public and council. For example, the Transportation System Plan had extensive public engagement due to the wide-ranging implications to city policies, regulations, and project priorities. In the next step of the planning process, more detailed project plans are made in collaboration with engineering and design teams, partner agencies, and further input from the community. Funding options, including qualifying grant opportunities, are also identified in this phase. Once funding and project plans are in place, the CIP is compiled and presented to the Budget Committee, which creates another opportunity for members of the public to weigh in. Then, City Council approves the CIP in March, and the capital projects in the first 2 years receive appropriation authority for the proposed biennial budget. After budget adoption, the next phase of planning, design, and building can begin, and the cycle starts anew for future capital projects. Each cycle, city staff continue to seek opportunities to improve the CIP process. This year, the most noticeable change to the CIP is the format in which the document is being presented. In order to achieve greater efficiencies and provide a better product to the community, the city has transitioned the CIP document to the same interactive online platform we use for the city's biennial budget documents. Though the CIP document looks slightly different this year, all previously provided content has been retained and new content has been added to increase understanding of planned capital projects. This new content includes dynamic individual project maps, an upcoming biennial capital plan summary, and detailed breakdowns of funding sources per project by source and year, as well as increased functionality for viewers of the document. Another new feature available this year is an interactive online map of CIP projects created by GIS staff in Public Works Engineering and located on the city's website. This map allows users to view plottable CIP projects geospatially, to view street-level detail of project locations, and to see individual project details and descriptions within the map interface. In addition to other improvements, we are continuing to dial in on estimates of greenhouse gas emissions, or GHGs, as well as project-specific and operating cost reporting. In the 2025-2031 CIP, a total of approximately 42,000 GHGs are currently estimated to result from the construction of projects. GHG emissions details can be found within the document, along with information about the city's continued efforts toward reducing emissions and decarbonization of city buildings. These two things Jeff and Jennifer will also share with you today. Increased project-specific reporting was implemented in previous CIPs in order to improve transparency. This year's CIP continues that effort with a total of 129 projects and programs identified and 102 locations viewable in the interactive map. Finally, staff attempt to estimate operating costs related to capital projects to improve budget planning, as well as communication with you and our community. In many cases, projects in the CIP are in early phase development, and estimating operating costs at this point in time is not feasible. Cost estimates for such projects are expected to appear in future CIPs or budget documents. Where possible, operating costs have been estimated and included in the CIP. In this table, you will see the total additional annual operating costs estimated from CIP projects. In FY27, we anticipate about $1.2 million in new annual ongoing operating expenses. This estimate increases to about $4.9 million ongoing after the completion of the airport expansion projects in the later years of the CIP. Operating costs resulting from airport projects make up about 86% of this total. These operating costs are accounted for in funds outside of the general fund and are not part of the general fund gap. Rather, airport operating expenses are fully supported by airline rates and charges and non-airline related revenue. The remaining 14% of additional estimated operating expenses are from parks and open space projects. These operating costs are typically supported by the Parks and Recreation operating levy. However, operating costs not covered by the current levy will need support from another revenue source, such as a future levy. These expenditures are also now eligible for stormwater utility support. Our total proposed 2025-2031 CIP capital plan equals $481.2 million. And this chart shows how the proposed CIP funds are divided into 6 functional program areas. This does not include the $4.9 million in expected annual operating costs shown on the previous slide. You will note that Airport has the largest portion of the CIP with 10 projects totaling $298.1 million. The bulk of this amount is associated with the Concourse C addition project. Transportation is the second largest program area with 38 projects totaling $89.7 million, most of which are funded by the 2022 voter-approved street bond. Of note, airport and transportation also account for the majority of estimated GHG emissions from project construction. Our capital projects are funded in a multitude of ways. This graph shows a variety of funding sources for the $481.2 million in anticipated capital funding. It is important to remember that most capital project funding comes from sources that are restricted to particular uses, such as the street bond funding for transportation projects or federal and state grants, and that this funding cannot be used for other purposes such as general fund operating expenses. As you can see in the chart, the Airport Construction Fund is by far the largest source of funding for the CIP. This fund is fully supported by airport revenues, and no general fund capital is required for airport projects. The second largest funding source comes through grants from the FAA, followed by the street bond approved by voters in 2022. As mentioned, both of these sources have very specific guidelines and restrictions on use of funds. Other funding source restrictions are outlined in the Reader's Guide section of the CIP document. This slide displays the total capital costs included in the CIP for the upcoming 2025-27 biennium by program area and funding source. You'll note that grant funding supports about half of the capital costs, and much like the full 6-year CIP, airport and transportation projects make up the largest shares by program area. Some projects in the upcoming biennium are anticipated to be funded by an airport revenue bond. This financing plan is still in development, and associated projects will be brought back in front of council in the coming months for approval. I'm now going to turn it over to Jeff Perry, our Facilities Director, to talk about public buildings and facilities capital projects.
Thanks, Keisha. Hello, I'm here to review the capital improvement program for public buildings and related capital projects. The city manages a wide range of public facilities, including police and fire stations, community centers, swimming pools, parking structures, and historic properties, libraries, performing arts centers, and a city hall. In total, the city maintains almost 200 buildings encompassing over 2 million square feet. Beyond maintaining existing facilities, the city also focuses on planning, constructing, and expanding new facilities to address the needs of the community. Maintenance and preservation efforts are primarily funded by the general fund, while major renovations and new construction rely on dedicated and external funding sources such as the recent Parks and Rec bond and urban renewal funds. Public buildings and facilities projects are derived from several adopted plans and regulations that guide our work. These include the Facility Condition Assessment, the Parks and Rec System Plan, the Parking Structure Condition Analysis, the Climate Recovery Ordinance, ADA requirements, and LEED Sustainable Design Standards for major construction projects. Capital improvement projects for general fund facilities fall under 3 main categories: facility preservation and maintenance. These projects preserve, maintain, and repair systems associated with existing facilities and are allocated within the following program areas: annual exterior preservation and maintenance, annual flooring and interior upgrades, hazardous remediation, parking lot and pavement maintenance, small re-roofing projects, contingency and emergency projects, planned repair projects. Examples of projects in these categories include roofing and siding replacement, mechanical, electrical, and plumbing repairs, painting projects, fire system maintenance, and building controls and lighting upgrades. General site and facility improvements. Projects in this category include modifications or additions to existing facilities to meet operational, safety, and cost efficiency goals and to comply with ADA guidelines. The primary goal of this category is to address changing program area functions and to improve service delivery. New capital facilities. Projects in this category typically provide for either new or replacement facilities or are projects that expand existing facilities and services and are of such a scale to warrant classification as standalone projects. Large-scale facility changes that are needed to provide for community growth are found in this category of projects. Examples of these types of projects include the recent City Hall renovation and construction of the Farmers Market Pavilion. The CIP includes approximately $32 million allocated for cities, buildings, and structures, with about $9 million dedicated for preservation and maintenance of general fund facilities. Next, I'll discuss some accomplishments and projects the CIP will focus on during the FY 25 through 27 fiscal year. Roofing replacement and exterior repair projects are always a very high priority for the capital improvement program, since failing systems can cause extensive damage to many other building systems, which will lead to much higher repair and replacement costs. Several major roofing projects were completed over the last fiscal year, including roofing replacement at the Eugene Public Library, Fire Station 1, and Fire Station 11. Roofing replacement at the library was particularly costly due to the complexity of the project and large HVAC equipment that had to be removed and reinstalled using a crane. Needed siding and exterior repairs were also made to Fire Station number 2. Projects planned for in the upcoming CIP include roofing replacement at Fire Station 10, the Emergency Services Training Facility, Fire Logistics Facility, the Police Services Building, and the Graham Field House. And exterior repairs and window replacement are scheduled for the EPD headquarters facility. The climate recovery ordinance and decarbonization of public buildings is an ongoing priority for the capital fund. Electrification of HVAC systems, LED upgrades, the replacement of R22 refrigerant, and the implementation of building automation systems are routine projects the capital improvement program funds. In 2023, the HVAC system was replaced and upgraded at the Boys and Girls Club Ed Coleman Center facility, along with replacement of the roof. The new system not only added air conditioning to the gymnasium, which was a very high priority for the Boys and Girls Club program, but it also helped reduce energy use and carbon emissions. Additionally, the system features enhanced filtration to help maintain fresh air in the facility during wildfire events. Other climate recovery projects completed include envelope improvements to the Peterson Barn Community Center and replacement of gas-fired heating equipment at Fire Station 1 and Fire Station 11. Planning is currently underway to convert smaller gas units to heat pumps at the Emergency Services Training Facility. There were also a number of large accessibility-related projects completed over the last fiscal year. This included kitchen and restroom upgrades at Peterson Barn, replacement of the west stairs in the Overpark Garage, along with concrete repairs and accessibility improvements at City Hall. In fact, the design and construction team came up with a creative and cost-effective solution to bring the plaza and access to council chambers compliant with ADA by utilizing stained concrete that designates a path that meets slope requirements for accessibility. Modernization of the Holt Center's patron elevator, which is a single point of failure for the facility if it breaks down, is an upcoming CIP project currently in the planning and design stages. Although they're generally smaller projects and don't always receive a great deal of attention, the CIP also funds numerous flooring replacement and repair projects. The hardwood floors of the Morse family farm were recently refinished, and flooring upgrades were made to the Peterson Barn Community Center. New projects will be scheduled on an as-needed basis over the course of the upcoming fiscal year. Capital funds are also used to improve resiliency, safety, and security, both for the public and city staff. Recently completed projects include backup power upgrades and repairs at the Central Lane 911 Center and City Hall. New backup generators were also installed at several fire stations to help avoid interruption of emergency services during power outages. Fire alarm and security upgrades have occurred at multiple recreation facilities, along with the Public Works Roosevelt Yard and City Hall. Although the CIP focuses on preventative maintenance and long-term planning to ensure building systems are replaced before they fail, emergency projects are still common and often need to be addressed immediately. During the summer of 2023, staff discovered that the Holt Center's 40-year-old waste lines were beginning to fail prematurely. In coordination with the Cultural Services team, Facilities was able to develop a scope of work and hire a contractor under short notice to complete the emergency repairs while the theater was dark. The contingency project, funded by CIP dollars, helped avoid shutting the facility down unexpectedly and losing a substantial amount of revenue. Examples of other contingency projects include emergency waistline repairs at the Graham Fieldhouse, replacement of a large recirculating pump at Amazon Pool, structural beam repairs at Fire Station 11, and replacement of the roof at the Boys and Girls Club Ed Coleman Center facility. Although the Public Works Roosevelt Yard campus falls outside of the general fund CIP, facility supports capital preservation and maintenance projects and and planning work at the critically important site, which houses Public Works maintenance, fleet, and parks and open space. One noteworthy project led by Public Works staff will focus on significant energy efficiency upgrades. Utilizing an energy savings performance contract, the Roosevelt site will undergo LED lighting upgrades and the installation of photovoltaic systems on multiple buildings, paired with an on-site battery storage system for backup power. These upgrades will not only reduce energy consumption and carbon emissions, but also enhance the site's resiliency. A substantial portion of the project will be funded by $1 million community renewable energy grant administered by the Oregon Department of Energy. In July of 2023, the city purchased eWeb's headquarters facility for the purposes of a new city hall. The project included new paint and finishes, carpet replacement, renovation of the north building for the council chambers, along with needed repairs to the building's HVAC, electrical, and fire, life, and safety systems. Seismic and security upgrades were also made to the building. In addition to technological improvements, the council chambers features a unique ceiling grid that's constructed from repurposed cedar from the old City Hall facility. Also worth noting, facilities performed all of the programming and architectural design work in-house, which would normally be outsourced, along with major upgrades to the building's HVAC digital control system, which was also performed by staff. In total, work performed internally saved the project over $1 million. Staff recently completed a condition assessment of city facilities. The pie chart in this slide illustrates the type of deficiencies based on project categories. Representing almost 70% of total deficiencies, building system repairs and replacement are the highest priority projects for CIP funds. These projects often include roofing replacement, siding replacement, and major building system repairs that are required for a facility to function. The chart in this slide illustrates deficiencies based on how critical preservation and maintenance work is needed. Deficiencies classified as critical and potentially critical are generally called out as specific projects in the CIP and actively being worked on or planned for. This represents roughly $9 million in CIP projects, with another $30 million which should be addressed within the next 6 years and beyond. Now I'll hand it over to Jennifer to talk about Public Works projects.
All right, thanks, Jeff. So again, my name is Jennifer Willer. I am the city engineer and manager of the engineering division in Public Works. And I'll be giving a brief overview of the 5 Public Works service areas included in the proposed CIP, which includes airport, parks and open space, stormwater, transportation, and wastewater. This list includes some of the most common guides and plans that either list or guide project selection. Each service area also includes their own specific plans and guides, but these are some that you'll see influencing all of the service areas. In the Reader's Guide section of the CIP document, there is a comprehensive list of guides and plans, including information about when they were last updated, when they will next be updated, and opportunities for public engagement on the update. This is the best way for the public to participate in the project selection process. As it can take many years to obtain funding and prepare a project for construction, the prioritization of a project often takes place in these long-range planning documents long before a project is shown in a budget document such as the CIP. One thing to keep in mind when reviewing the public works portion of the CIP, a relatively small $3.4 million of the $449.4 million is general capital fund. The remaining $446 million of the public works capital improvement projects are funded from regulated or dedicated revenue sources. For example, many of the projects are specifically identified and required by voter-approved funding measures or in City Council-approved project lists associated with those funding measures. In addition to considerations about dedicated revenue sources, additional project selection criteria include addressing regulatory or permit requirements, eliminating or mitigating hazards, and addressing excessive maintenance and operation costs. We also consider equity across the community, both distributive equity and considering historic underspending. And another consideration is to address protection of natural resources. Finally, we routinely consider opportunities to leverage city funds, such as obtaining grants. Many of the grants we obtain have a 10 to 20% local match requirement. And while grant projects come with their own complexities, these grants allow for the construction of projects we otherwise wouldn't be able to afford and funding to be stretched further. First up is the airport portion of the CIP. The COVID-19 pandemic had far-reaching implications with severe reductions in passenger numbers and flight schedules for years. Eugene Airport has now fully recovered and is well above the FY19 passenger numbers. Between 2019 and 2023, the Eugene Airport saw a 14% retention rate increase of local passengers who had previously been utilizing the Portland International Airport. Capital projects for the Eugene Airport are outlined in and structured by the Eugene Airport Master Plan and the 5-year Federal Aviation Administration, or FAA, Capital Improvement Plan. These documents provide for planned development of airport property and facilities to accommodate future aviation demand while remaining compatible with the environment and community development. Project priorities are determined through a process based on the adopted master plan and FAA approval. Additionally, an advanced terminal planning study was completed in FY23 to direct the development of Concourse C, which is identified in the larger plans as necessary due to projected increased passenger demand. Looking at airport funding sources, the airport portion of the CIP is $298.1 million from dedicated airport fee and grant revenue sources funding 10 projects and programs. The future terminal expansion and enabling projects are assumed to need financing from a future revenue bond, and these costs are currently included as airport construction. There will be city council conversations later this year to discuss airport expansion and financing needs. The majority of greenhouse gas emissions at the airport are generated by aircraft and ground service vehicles, which are not under the control of the airport. The airport does look for opportunities to implement the Climate Recovery Ordinance and the Climate Action Plan 2.0 or CAP 2.0 and other sustainable practices into actions and facilities that we do control. The airport continues to look for opportunities to incorporate sustainable materials into all capital construction, Additionally, solar power was incorporated into the quick turnaround rental car facility, a project included in the prior CIP. And looking forward, the airport will be implementing improvements identified from an energy audit of airport facilities, incorporating green building techniques into the concourse and terminal building construction, developing a microgrid resiliency plan, and completing an electric vehicle charging and renewable solar energy planning project. I wanted to highlight a couple of categories of airport projects included in the CIP. The CIP includes $26.97 million in preservation and maintenance projects, including 2 airfield projects as shown on this slide. This category of projects is focused on existing infrastructure and maximizing its longevity and use. Most of the airport CIP is in this category, with $263.33 million going towards upgrades and capacity enhancements, which are focused on providing facilities to service both the near-term and long-term capacity needs of the airport. Next up is Parks and Open Space. And the Parks and Open Space Division, or POSE, stewards over 5,200 acres of land, approximately 4,300 acres of which are in natural area parks. There are a lot of plans and guides that direct the Parks and Open Space projects shown in this CIP. The 2018 Picture Plan Play, a vision and implementation plan for Eugene's parks and recreation system, is the overarching plan, which lists specific park development projects and identifies relative priorities among the listed projects over a 30-year planning period. On this POSE funding slide, this is where you find the capital general funds in Public Works of $3.4 million. The remainder of the total $25.1 million of POSE CIP funding for 18 capital projects and programs comes from dedicated revenue sources, with Parks System Development Charges, or SDCs, providing the majority of funding. POSE activities around climate action and resilience are focused on reducing water usage, reducing energy usage, tree planting and other vegetated infrastructure, and incorporating sustainable materials into construction. So this is the larger category of POSE projects in the CIP, the construction of new capital facilities at $14.54 million. This category is made up of several Eugene Parks Foundation projects, the continuation of some large projects such as the Riverfront Plaza, and new capacity projects or phases of projects. POSE preservation and maintenance is the next largest category, and it's focused on existing infrastructure and maximizing its longevity and use. Projects include partnership projects, installation of donated items, and capital renovation and preservation of existing parks and sites. The next Public Works CIP category is capital stormwater. So there's a long list of plans, guides, and permits that direct the selection and prioritization of stormwater projects. In addition to city plans and guides, the stormwater program is highly regulated, which results in a lot of acronyms, and is highly regulated, and permits such as the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System, or NPDES permit, and the Willamette Total Basin Maximum Daily Load, or TMDL, implementation plan heavily influence the projects in the CIP. The funding sources for stormwater capital are dedicated sources in the amount of $16.1 million for 21 projects and programs in this proposed CIP, with user fees making up most of the revenue. The climate action work of the capital stormwater program is focused on creating a more resilient system with capacity for changing and emergency conditions. This work includes the restoration of existing infrastructure and waterways, reducing the impacts from impervious surfaces, and expanding vegetation and urban forestry benefits within the community. Stormwater functional and safety projects is the biggest category of stormwater projects at $5.87 million, with projects focused on preserving the functionality and operations of existing stormwater facilities. There are also several projects to address safety concerns, such as the undermining of bridge structures and a feasibility study related to the removal of the Willamette River Diversion Dam. Stormwater upgrades and capacity enhancements is the next largest category of capital stormwater projects at $4.35 million. These projects are about addressing capacity of the existing stormwater system and is very much focused on the climate resiliency goals. A significant number of the projects are to improve existing stormwater facilities and waterways to better withstand projected conditions and reduce the occurrence of and impacts from flooding. So the next Public Works CIP category is transportation. Eugene's transportation system represents the city's most expensive asset, with nearly 540 miles of paved streets, over 770 miles of sidewalks, and nearly 190 miles of on-street bike lanes, and over 45 miles of off-street paths, along with all of the signal, lighting, signing, and pavement markings that go along with these facilities. This is the list of the most common policies, plans, and guides that influence the selection of projects. I wanted to note that during this CIP period, the Transportation System Plan will be turning 10 years old and will be due for an update. Additionally, the state rulemaking known as the Climate Friendly and Equitable Communities, or CFAC, has also directed the update of TSPs to be completed by the end of 2029. Formal public engagement activities are anticipated in 2027. The funding sources for the 38 transportation capital projects and programs shown in this CIP are dedicated sources in the amount of $89.7 million, with funding from the 2022 street bond measure making up most of the revenue, with transportation SDCs and the local gas tax about equal for the next biggest sources. The TSP and the CAP 2.0 drive the progress made and the opportunities to address climate action and resiliency in this program. The CRO called for a 50% reduction in fossil fuel usage, and the TSP built upon that by adding a goal to triple the number of trips made by walking, bicycling, and using transit. Nearly every transportation project in the CIP includes elements related to these policies and plans, from the construction of active transportation facilities, adding safety and efficiency features for all travelers, and the use of construction materials and methods with lower embodied greenhouse gas emissions than more traditional materials and methods. The largest transportation CIP category is preservation and maintenance at $70.29 million, with the 2022 street bond measure 20-333 making up most of this. The remaining amount is primarily from the local gas tax, which is 5 cents per gallon, which is used for local street repairs and slurry seals, street preservation, often related to the bond measure projects but not named in the bond measure, and matching funds for grant-funded projects. Upgrades and capacity enhancements is the next largest category, and primarily includes the use of transportation SDCs to fund projects in the TSP, primarily as local match for grants. Functional and safety projects include the road fund gas tax distributed by the state. While the vast majority of these funds go towards operations and maintenance, there is a portion that is used to fund capital programs shown in this slide. And finally, the wastewater portion of the CIP. Public Works operates and maintains over 800 miles of sanitary sewer pipes, including associated laterals in the right-of-way, manholes, and pump stations. The wastewater plans that have the most, I'm sorry, next slide, thank you. The wastewater plans that have the most influence over project selection in the CIP have been the Wastewater Master Plan and plans regarding housing and development needs. The Wastewater Master Plan depicts how the system may be expanded to serve future housing and industrial development. And working closely with the Planning and Community Development divisions and implementing Envision Eugene and a housing implementation pipeline, projects are selected consistent with these plans. The wastewater CIP includes 15 capital projects and programs and is primarily funded from two dedicated sources, the local wastewater system development charges revenue and the user fees, for a total of $20.4 million. The climate action and resilience portion related to the wastewater program consists of preserving the existing system to reduce the intrusion of groundwater into the system, leading to reduced capacity, increased energy usage, and increased treatment costs. Construction techniques such as rehabilitating existing pipelines in place rather than open trench replacement leads to less construction time and impacts, as well as reduced waste materials. The largest program is the preservation and maintenance program of the existing system, as described on the previous climate action slide, with $11.45 million over the course of the CIP going into this category. The new capital facilities category includes projects to support the capacity and expansion needed to serve both residential and industrial development. This CIP expands on the inclusion of the Crow Road wastewater extension in the last CIP by adding an initial phase of wastewater facilities to serve the Clear Lake area and Prairie Road south of Beltline, both serving industrial properties, and housing-related extensions in the Willow Creek 18th Avenue area and along key transportation corridors. And that concludes the Public Works portion of the CIP projects.
Thank you, Jennifer. So to recap, the 2025-2031 CIP includes a total of $481.2 million in capital spending over the next 6 years, with an estimated $4.9 million in added annual operational costs. When approved by council, the first 2 years of the CIP, which includes $192.6 million for the upcoming biennium, will become the proposed 2025-27 capital budget. City staff have continued to improve efficiencies and service delivery through a new online interactive document and map, as well as transparent GHG reporting where possible, and detail for 129 individual projects or programs in this CIP. Capital program staff also continue to make progress on projects that support the city's climate action plan and seek new opportunities for increasing resiliency and building for the future. As we look at our process timeline, on February 12th, the Budget Committee recommended to Council the proposed CIP as presented. Next, Council will meet in mid-March to hold a public hearing and take action to adopt the CIP. Then later this spring, the adopted CIP will serve as the basis for our capital program and the proposed 2025-27 biennial budget. Lastly, I want to say thank you to City of Eugene staff who helped put this document together. There have been many employees from across the organization who worked exceptionally hard to create the capital plan, ensure a smooth implementation of new features, and make the CIP as complete and transparent as possible. And I want to thank you all as well for your time and attention this evening. If there are any questions, staff are available to answer them.
Thank you, Keisha, Jeff, and Jennifer. Looks like we've got some questions. Commissioner Edwards.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for the presentation. I'm sorry, I've been really sick, so it sounds terrible, and I just realized it. I had a quick question. Well, actually, I had two questions, but the first question was, the City of Eugene has a $10.5 million legislative ask for Clear Lake infrastructure. I'm wondering if that's reflected. I did see a couple of little line items in there, but is overall that 10.5 million reflected in various projects in the CIP, or would that be new?
That would be new. So typically we don't show grants in the CIP until we've signed a funding agreement with the granting agency. And so yeah, that legislative ask would be a new addition.
Okay. I'll go ahead and let others go. Thank you.
You'll have time to jump back in if you want. Commissioner Edwards, Commissioner Isaacson is the other hand that we've got up.
You may have answered one of my questions. So back on the total funding picture, we had 50% of the funding coming from grants. Those are deals that we've already inked. They are funding that is not at risk from any source. It's banked.
I don't know if someone from the airport is here or if Keisha might remember the answer, because I know that Catherine Stevens, the airport director, addressed this at the budget committee, but the FAA, so those grants that are shown in the CIP are FAA grants, and there's some particular formulaic money that the airport uses with FAA that we do show those in this CIP. It just I don't know that I would go so far as that they're 100% guaranteed. I think that we're carefully watching what's going on at the federal level around federal funding, but that funding is a little different than some of the other grants that we deal with in public works, in the other areas of public works.
That was the question I was asking. Is by the math on about 4 slides more, 106 million or 36% of the budget was coming from the FAA grant, or FAA at least from the FAA, and I wonder what our exposure is to changing winds at the federal level.
Hi, this is Stephanie Picot from the airport. I just wanted to jump in here a little bit on that question. So the FAA, yes, that's the slide there, provides entitlement grant money that the airport receives every year. It's basically re-upped through Congress periodically. So it's like a 5-year increment. So we get entitlement grants through that we automatically receive. And then we also receive some other funding, bill funding through the AIG program and some discretionary AIP funding as well. And those we ask for when we need them. And then depending on the projects, they allocate out money for those projects. So that's where a lot of that funding's coming from. In history, we've seen a lot of we always get the entitlement grants and we get the AIG, but we have to kind of apply for the discretionary a lot of the time. So as far as what's going on with the new administration right now, we haven't heard anything that there's any issues going forward with our grants that the airport sees. Of course, that's something we're monitoring really closely and the industry is monitoring really closely, but we don't anticipate any issues with that funding.
Thank you. Last question on stormwater funding. You had 1.5 million for the wetland mitigation bank. Have we opened the bank back up to new credits, excuse me, between forest and marsh and grassland?
I don't think that we have opened that up yet. I saw some literature on that a few days ago, and I can't remember the details of it, but I think that this is to begin construction on a new bank that would be future credits.
I heard that we were potentially opening that up in January. I just wasn't sure if it had gone live yet. And given that the credit prices doubled in the past 18 months or so.
Yeah, I'll have to follow up on that and get those details for you.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thanks, Commissioner Isaacson. Commissioner Beeson.
First off, thank you very much for the presentation, and I'm always impressed when I see the capital plan. I'm always impressed with all the city plans, and there's a couple of comments I want to make. I think there's obviously a lot of work that goes into this. I know you do it, you kind of do iterations of it over time and it builds on itself. And I know there are others involved besides you guys, but it's just very impressive the way everything's organized, the way you document it, and the way go through the process of how you get the projects prioritized and how you put all this together. I also think it's always, I don't want to say it's always impressive, but one of the things I've learned since I've been part of this group, see a lot of is kind of the integration of all the city plans and the way that you guys, you'll put something here and you'll have this plan, and then you've got the climate action plan, the transportation plans, and you listed many others on several of the slides. And I think there's just, for people in the community or others who are interested in this stuff, there is just a great deal of information here, and it's very well organized. I like the way, and maybe you've been doing this for a while, but it seems to come through more and more, the integration of the climate action work in the various areas, whether it's, particularly, I guess, in transportation, stormwater, wastewater. And I see evidence of it when I go around town. And I just think it's really good the way that you kind of have that structured and the way it comes through from the plans all the way through construction and into the city. I have a couple of questions. I have kind of just a very particular one. It was back on, I think, slide 3. You have one that shows your process. It's kind of a wheel. And yeah, and one of the things that caught my eye under CIP process over there, it says compilation of projects. And then it says balancing of projects in neighborhoods. What is that? What does that mean?
I'll let Jennifer answer that because I think that falls into more of the project selection criteria and what departments do when they're elevating projects and figuring out a long-term plan. So I'll let Jennifer answer that.
So yeah, I mean, that goes back to part of anytime we're doing the big selection of projects, we take a look to make sure that all areas of the city are benefiting from the work. And that most recently, I think you can see that really obviously in the bond measure for funding street repairs, that, we made sure that there was a balance of work across all wards going into that bond measure. And we do that with just how we, like for the pipelining projects for the wastewater preservation work, that, we're rotating those pipelining projects around the community.
Okay. Well, I thought it was something like that. I don't know if there's such a thing as older wards and newer wards. It seemed like with some of the things that you look at, there's some of the facilities have been there quite a bit longer in certain parts of the city. But anyway, so okay. I have a particular question also about airport funding, and it's somewhere in the airport plan. And anyway, just a question that came up for me as I was going through and listening to you. The airport costs a lot of money. It's a very nice facility. It's a very used facility, and it's also, I think, a regional airport. I guess my question is, are there other governmental entities in the area that participate in funding the airport?
So the airport is primarily funded with rates and charges for users that are using the airport. And then concessions revenues through the restaurant and the rental car agencies. We are also working with TSA that sometimes gives funding for like baggage systems and infrastructure like that the TSA utilizes. So there's funding there. The Federal Aviation Administration and the Department of Transportation also has funding that we receive. And then there's some other things, like we've received some energy grants. It was mentioned on one of the slides about microgrid. and EV charging stations for vehicles. And so there's quite a few areas, both competitive grants and then also grants that are just entitled that we can receive for various different types of projects. So there's a whole plethora of opportunities for funding, but our primary ones are through the federal government and then through user fees.
So kind of the federal side, the user fees, the grants and so on that you talked about, there's probably not much at all that would come, or if any, that comes from the general fund.
Nothing comes from the general fund for the
Nothing
airport.
from okay.
It's fully
Okay.
self-sustaining
Okay.
with funding from other sources. So I also didn't mention there are some state grants and some state funding that we receive as well. But nothing comes from the City of Eugene general fund at all.
Good. Thank you.
Absolutely.
I'll let you, I'll let some others go. I've got maybe one or two other questions, but.
Okay, Commissioner Ramey.
Well, thank you, Chair. So Commissioner Beeson really summed up a lot of my thoughts about this stuff. I come from a background of facilities planning, and frankly, listening to you exhausts me. So you guys have a full plate. And in fact, I look like I've been through that ringer already. Anyway, and I really appreciate the way you present it. And going through it, I know as staff is like a nuisance. Why don't we just go build the things? Why do we have to keep writing these stuff down? Well, it's important because it helps people like us understand the big picture and where it's going. And I'm not saying you don't think it's important, but just babbling out loud here. Along that line, I really appreciated the emphasis on the carbon neutral energy, what is it, the 2.0 plan, climate action plan, and how that had sort of woven its way into this process, and how you had pointed that out. And we, at our level, we're still in sticker shock from our housing needs analysis and what's happening with our housing units in the community. And I'm wondering if there is any way to draw a similar comparison between this kind of work and the ability of the community to build more housing. I know I'm probably catching you flat-footed, but maybe the next time you come, you'll have that more. But I think that would be a really great talking point. And I think it would help us understand as a community which ones of these to pay attention to. I mean, I can think of a couple, but y'all are up to your knees in it. So hopefully you could, maybe somebody on your team could provide a brief summary, but great job. Thank you so much. And if you could fill in the blanks about how this could help us build more housing, that'd be great.
Just a quick response. So most of that you'll see in the CIP in the wastewater section of the providing of wastewater extensions to serve development.
Any follow-up there, Commissioner Ramey? All set. Commissioner Bailey?
Yes, thank you. I also come from that facilities background in corporate Silicon Valley, so this is very impressive. And the CIP process at the university was also extremely arduous. So I feel for you all. What I'm wondering about is the reference was made to 42,000 greenhouse gas emissions, and I don't know if that's addressed in the climate action plan, but I wonder if any of you can speak to mitigation of the greenhouse gas emissions.
Yeah, I'll give a shot at that. So that number is kind of our working mitigated number. So that unfortunately, the nature of construction will result in greenhouse gas emissions just through construction equipment and producing materials that then get put on the ground. And so as I kind of wove through my presentation, there's a lot of places, a lot of forks in the road where we can make choices about what type of materials we use or how we phase the construction in a way that we try to mitigate that, natural embodied greenhouse gas emissions of the construction process. And so, yeah, we're I mean, not to completely pat myself or our organization on the back, I would say that the city of Eugene is a leader in using sustainable construction materials, especially in our public works construction. And I know that we're routinely contacted to find out about our different techniques and the materials and the specifications that we use on our projects. And that can be seen on our roadway preservation projects. It can be seen in our pipelining projects for the wastewater system, that we line those pipes before they fail and have to be completely dug up and reconstructed. So that's where you probably see most of the mitigation in our programs.
Thank you. I'm very delighted to hear that it's a high priority. I'm very pleased with that. Thank you.
Okay, not seeing any other questions at this point. Oh, it looks like Commissioner Beeson. Go for it.
Yeah, I mean, since we're here, I have a couple more questions. First off, I think you guys should all go ahead and pat yourselves on the back. I think I was saying, yeah, I think a lot of this is very good. And I have two kind of other questions. I'm really interested in aging infrastructure. I think that's just it's great to build new things and build new roads and build new sewers and all of that stuff. And in a city like Eugene, as time goes by, you have all this stuff out there that's aging. I think we've shown as a city, in terms of the road fund and how you kind of handled that and getting everything repaving on a schedule and so on, have handled that pretty well. And then I noticed the words aging infrastructure somewhere in there to do with the wastewater, and you have some, I don't need to understand how it works, but you can go in, I guess, and kind of rehabilitate or reset the inner surfaces of the wastewater lines. And I think that's very, very interesting. My particular question about it, particularly maybe with storm sewer, and also, I don't know maybe so much about storm sewer, but with the wastewater, the amount of investment we have in the wastewater lines, are we pretty well caught up on aging infrastructure? Are we like way behind? Have we done like 40% of what we maybe need to do at this point? Or do you have sort of a gauge of that, or where we are on that stuff?
So I don't have a gauge, but I can tell you emphatically that we're not caught up.
Okay.
But this is something that is a constant thing that we're going to be working on. And we really do focus on doing that trenchless pipe rehabilitation that's on this slide, of looking for ways to line the pipes because we get the most bang for our buck. And it has real impacts to the capacity of the lines themselves, maintaining capacity at the wastewater treatment plant, which also helps us with future growth demand too, right? The more that we can prevent the groundwater leaking into our wastewater pipes, that leads to more capacity at the wastewater treatment plant, that we don't have to expand the wastewater treatment plant as soon. And so, yeah, I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but if you went through and added up all the preservation and maintenance categories, that's what you're talking about, is preserving that aging infrastructure and rehabilitating it so it lasts another 20, 30, 40, 50 years or more.
It's a tremendously important part of everything you do. One last question. This one, you don't have to go too far down the road on this. It gets back to the housing units that was brought, Commissioner Ramey mentioned, and they're clearly on our mind. I mean, I think from my perspective, it's been pretty recent. I mean, the last 4 or 5 months, we started hearing, gosh, we're going to need a lot more housing than we thought. And I kind of think, maybe a year or two ago, we were thinking one number, and now I don't know that it's doubled, but it's a lot more. So I find myself wondering, as I go through all of this that you're doing, particularly with the different sewers, the roads, and so on. And I heard the housing implementation plan kind of referenced as a source for some of our input for decisions you make. Did hearing that we needed 27,000 new units over the next 20 years, does that cause any sort of rechecking of some of this or reworking of it, or just I'm
So I'll have to let one of our partners at PDD address like the numbers itself, but I don't think so, because we have long range plans to show how we serve the entire UGB. And we've also done planning with PDD to look at how we might serve the urban reserves. So we have those master plans. For us, the challenge has always been how to pay for it. And, historically, for many decades, the city has had the policy that growth pays for growth. And I think we're trying to be more creative, given those numbers that are coming out and what we need to do to support housing, of trying to figure out some new ways to pay for those expansions. And those expansions in this CIP, especially in the wastewater section, you'll see that there's not only some expansions to new areas that haven't been fully served, but there's also some, what we're identifying, that there's some locations near key transportation corridors that maybe have a wastewater line that's like 150 or 200 feet away. And so we're looking at projects to extend that pipe, that 150, 200 feet, to just make that project more viable for that infill development.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, that's helpful. Thanks. Appreciate the presentation. Thanks.
And Commissioner Bailey?
Yeah, I may have misunderstood that. You just made reference to service within the UGB, and I'm wondering about areas that are county and not city. Doesn't this all relate to city projects and not county?
So it's a little bit of both. So we're looking for opportunity. So it has to be within the urban growth boundary. But when we do a project, Crow Road is the perfect example out there. So it's outside the city limits, but within the UGB. So as part of the project development, we are going through a process to annex the road right away, and have talked to Lane County about that and doing a jurisdictional transfer of the roadway to the city so that we can do the project. But in the course of doing that project development, then we have reached out to all the adjacent property owners and said, hey, if you want to piggyback on our annexation application, we would include you if you would like to do that. And we've had a number of property owners that have want to take advantage of that. So, I mean, that's kind of how we're looking at some of these capital projects and those extension projects happening.
Great, thank you. And can you share the slides with us and your
I think they've been emailed out, Commissioner Bailey. I think Crystal sent them out before the meeting, so you should have those.
Great, thanks.
Okay, well, thanks for an excellent presentation to Keisha, Jeff, Stephanie, and Jennifer, and some really illuminating questions as well. Since we're finished with this portion of the meeting, next on our agenda is items from commission and staff. Are there any items or info to share from commissioners? Commissioner Isaacson?
I just had a question for staff. Do we have any timeline on HB 2001? I know that our latest revision has been kind of adopted, but I wasn't sure if we had any update. It was just on my calendar for conversation.
I don't have that at my fingertips, so I'll have to get back to you. You're talking middle housing remand. Sure, I'll get back to you.
Thank you.
Thank you. It looks like Terry is standing in on staff tonight. Terry.
Sure, thank you. Yes, I'm sitting in for Alyssa today, and the updates that I have to share have to do with your upcoming meetings. So we've already canceled the March 11th meeting. We didn't have any agenda items ready for you, and we'll also be canceling March 25th. Your next meeting that we have scheduled is April 22nd, where you'll hear about updates to the floodplain regulations and the public health standards that are being worked on. And the council will be having a public hearing and taking potential action on the CIP on March 10th. Those are really the only updates I have, unless there are other questions.
Any other questions for Terry? Well, with that, thanks, Terry. This meeting of the Planning Commission is now adjourned. Have a great week, all.
Thank you all.